everyone, my name is Sarah Gorm, and today I'll be presenting my capstone project titled Overrepresentation of Marginalized Groups in Special Education. This topic focuses on how systematic inequalities and bias practices can lead to students of color being placed in special education at higher rates than their peers. I'll also share strategies educators can use to make classrooms more inclusive and equitable. Here are some questions I want you to think about while listening to this presentation. Have you seen examples of students being misunderstood or unfairly labeled in your own school experiences? And what strategies do you think are most important in creating inclusive classrooms? Why this matters? This issue matters because it affects the lives and futures of thousands of students every year. Research shows that Black, Latino, and Indigenous students are disproportionately identified for special education. This can lead to their separation from general education classrooms, limited access to rigorous instruction, and long-term negative academic and social outcomes. What's concerning is that many of these placements are due not to actual disabilities, but to factors like bias, poverty, and cultural misunderstandings. As future educators, it's our responsibility to recognize these patterns and work toward more equitable practices. This graph shows research done by the California Department of Education in 2013. It confirms that there is an overrepresentation of Black students in disability diagnosis. Even though there are only 28.02% of Oakland students that are Black, they comprise of 46.34% of intellectual disability, 64.2% of emotional disturbance, and 46.65% of specific learning disability diagnosis. The opposite trend is seen for white students. White students are 9.79% of the total student body, but account for only 2.93%, 5.62%, and 5.51% of intellectual disability, emotional disturbance, and specific learning disability diagnoses. This means that in the city of Oakland, white students are underrepresented in special education enrollment, and Black students are overrepresented in each of the disability categories analyzed by this research. Understanding overrepresentation. Overrepresentation means that a specific group is placed in special education programs more often than expected based on their actual disability rates. For example, Black students are about 40% more likely to be labeled with emotional or behavioral disorders than white students, even when controlling for behavior and performance. Often, this is because typical behavior or cultural expression is misinterpreted as defiance or disorder. These misdiagnoses can result in unnecessary segregation and reduced opportunities. Once labeled, it can be difficult for students to return to general education. This reinforces long-term inequality. What causes it? There are a few key causes behind this trend. One is implicit bias. This is the unconscious assumptions we all carry. For example, teachers might be more likely to see a Black student's behavior as aggressive, even if it's the same behavior shown by another student. Another factor is poverty. Students living in low-income areas often face challenges like hunger, housing instability, or lack of health care. These can impact their ability to focus or perform well in school, but are sometimes misinterpreted as learning disabilities. Lastly, cultural misunderstandings play a big role. A student from a culture that values silence or indirect eye contact may be seen as disengaged or inattentive. Without cultural competence, teachers may refer students for special education when what they've seen is just a different way of expressing themselves. Impact on students. The consequences of this overrepresentation are serious. When a student is misidentified and placed into special education, it can damage their self-confidence. This can change how they see themselves. These students might start to believe they're not capable, even if the label is inaccurate. It can also lower the expectations that teachers, peers, and even families have for them. Once a label is in place, students are often tracked into less challenging classes and may not be given the tools they need to succeed. Over time, this leads to social stigma, reduced graduation rates, and fewer opportunities after school. Tied to what we've learned. This topic connects directly to several concepts we've talked about in class. First is identity formation. Students form their identities through how others treat them. If they are constantly treated as less than or incapable, that can deeply affect their self-image or motivation. Next, ecological and sociocultural perspectives remind us that students aren't isolated individuals. Their learning and behavior are shaped by their families, communities, schools, and even the policies of their district. If any of those systems are biased or under-resourced, students can be unfairly labeled or excluded. Finally, we've discussed inclusive education. This is the idea that schools should be built to serve all students, not just those who fit a certain mold. Inclusive practices mean designing flexible, supportive environments that don't single students out, but instead help everyone succeed. Solutions: what educators can do. So, how do we fix this? One major solution is Universal Design for Learning, or UDL. This approach involves creating lessons that are flexible and accessible from the start. For example, offering content in multiple formats: videos, text, audio, so students can learn in ways that work best for them. It also means giving students different ways to show what they know. Another important strategy is culturally responsive teaching. That means recognizing and valuing the diverse cultures our students come from. It involves integrating students' backgrounds into lessons, using materials that reflect their experiences, and building relationships based on trust and understanding. Finally, we need collaboration. General education teachers, special education teachers, specialists, and families all need to work together when deciding whether a student needs support. Families bring valuable insight, and their voices should be part of the process from day one. Conclusion: to sum up, overrepresentation is a real and harmful issue that impacts students of color in profound ways. It reflects broader systemic problems in our education system. But the good news is, educators can be a part of the solution. By understanding the causes of this trend, reflecting on our own biases, and implementing inclusive practices like Universal Design for Learning and culturally responsive teaching, we can help ensure that all students are fairly evaluated and supported. Inclusion isn't just for students with disabilities. It helps create classrooms where everyone belongs and has the chance to succeed. These are the main sources I use to guide my research and connect my ideas to course concepts. Authors like Morgan, Gay, and Rose provided valuable insights into both the problem and the solutions we can implement as future educators.